Hey, good morning. Yeah, I'm Alex. I'm an editor for Business Punk. We're a youngish entrepreneur magazine focusing on startups and tech generally. And for those of you who were expecting Tolga to be here, who's my colleague, he couldn't make it. He had to fly out to sunny Los Angeles today, so I don't know, he's pretty well off probably right now. But now, this is Jon von Tetzchner. He famously built the Opera browser in the 90s, as we already heard. And he's right now CEO and founder of Vivaldi. And this talk has the name Creating an Ethical Web. So we're going to be touching a bit on his work, on his views, and also on this being the day of net neutrality, focusing a bit on that. Really important is that please ask questions. This is a fireside chat, so you can use the slido.com. Your questions will appear right here. So make use of that, please. Yeah, Jon, can you give us a bit of a rundown what some of the ideas in your philosophy was back in the 90s when you built the Opera browser?
Well, I mean, when we were starting, it's very early days for the web, right? And we were looking at the different web browsers out there, and we felt, okay, we could do better. Same time, the browsers out there at the time were something like Mosaic.
Right.
I don't know if many of you have used that browser. Maybe not. No, no, but I guess our thinking was we could do something that would run better. We wanted to build something that would run on limited hardware. We wanted to build something that would adapt to you as a user. And we spent a lot of time doing that, making sure that it would be usable by anyone that wanted to get access to the internet. Even at this early stage of the web, we were thinking the web is going to be important, and we have to make sure that everyone can access it in the way that they would like to do.
Yeah, and it was really popular back then. I remember there's a story that they made you swim across the Atlantic because you hit a certain goal. Can you give us the history of that?
Yeah, that's a number of years later, but yeah, we put a target. If you'd have 1 million downloads in 4 days, I would go swimming. And the basic principle of this, I would swim from Norway to the US. I would stop over in Iceland for a cup of coffee with my mother.
Just from Iceland.
and started on this. There was my PR guy was in a raft beside me. Okay. There was a hole in the boat. He couldn't swim, so sadly I had to give up that particular swim.
For how long did you make it? Like how many hours did you?
There's a few hours there.
A few hours. Okay. And you said that you wanted to build a browser that differs from the ones that existed back then. Like, what were some of the aspects that really made a difference?
So a lot of my thinking has always been we should adapt to the requirements of the end user. So part of this was making sure that you could use it with keyboard shortcuts, including single key keyboard shortcuts. We also did that you would start with multiple windows.
Okay.
The default browsers over there were kind of starting with one, while we would start with multiple. We had things like scaling of content, which allowed you to basically scale up whatever content you're viewing for the purpose if you have low vision or the like. We were thinking about how to adapt to people's requirements with regards to low vision, not only making it bigger, but also changing the background colors and foreground colors to make it as readable as possible. So a lot of it was about accessibility, but the thinking that we had that anything that we do for anyone would help more people. And that's kind of what we are finding, that the features we were putting in place were useful not only for the ones that we are making them for specifically, but for everyone. And again, the principle there being that everyone should be able to get access to the internet because it's so important.
Okay. And what are some of the things that you transported from Opera to Vivaldi that you're building right now?
A lot of this is about the philosophy. It is about building a kind of browser that adapts to you as a user. And my feeling is that in the software, in the early days when I was doing software in the 80s and 90s and the like, the problem with software was that it was too complex. And then we went from complex to simplicity. But the way we solved that was to remove all functionality. So you would typically have a test, you'd ask or see what users were using, and then you would gradually remove functionality to the extent that it actually was not really useful for anyone. And I think that's kind of what we've seen with the browsers, is that they've been becoming very limited, and they're optimized for this average person that doesn't exist, because it's basically taking away all the special requirements that everyone of us has. Our vision is more about, okay, we see you, and if you're requesting something, we'll put it in there. We have a very close relationship with our users. We send out releases, we get feedback, and a lot of the things that we are putting in are just because our end users are asking for it. And instead of doing a survey or kind of actually monitoring what our users do, we don't do that. We just take the feedback. If you tell us you want something, we'll put it in there, as long as it's, I mean, we look at it, how long is it going to take to put it in there. But generally, we take the feedback from users, we put the functionality in, we do it in a way which looks great. We have great designers. But we are doing it in a way which is a lot harder than just removing. It's a lot easier just to remove functionality and just say no one needs it. Instead, we're going the hard way, which is, okay, putting in a wealth of functionality, but making sure it actually works.
Okay. How big is your user base right now?
Closing in on our first active million.
Active million, okay.
Yep.
And what parts of the world are especially into Vivaldi?
I mean, it's quite distributed. Our number one country in the world at this time is Japan.
Japan, okay.
The US second and Germany third.
Okay.
So it's quite distributed. I think you'll find that we have users all across the world.
Okay. This is a very user-centric product, is that what you said? And you have a test group of users that are always constantly giving feedback. What is the things that you're especially looking for from their feedback? Like,
I mean, so we have different layers of this. So we make builds every day for our internal group, the Sopranos. And they give us feedback on basically anything that they'd like to make feedback on, which is typically about how well it's working, if it's working for them, if it's working for them on their platform, any kind of improvements that we might make. We then send out weekly builds to our community site. Our community site is typically tens of thousands of people will download whatever build that we'll send out, and then they'll give us feedback on that particular build. And it can be anything. It can be that they don't like what we just added, that they like what we added, that they liked it, but they would like it to be different or changed, or sometimes it's just they want us to prioritize certain things over other things. We get a lot of feedback from this, and what we love doing is, and the guys, they go in there, they see the feedback, and if possible, sometimes they'll just take someone's comment and they'll say, okay, I'll do that now. Okay. And next day, they'll put in that feature or that change or that request. So we're kind of, we work in some ways ad hoc. It's not so planned. My personal view is that brains think better than a brain, so taking the input from all those people and just implementing and doing whatever they like, it's great.
Okay. Here's a good question. How do new browsers compete against the others? What are the success criteria? It's by Anonymous.
Well, for us, really, it's a question of being different than the others. The others, my feeling there is that they're limiting their scope. They're trying to make it as simple as possible to shift between them, and then they're competing on distribution more than anything else. In our case, we are a tiny company in comparison, and we don't have the means to do massive marketing campaigns. So really, for us, it's about winning over the hearts and minds of our users. So we're putting in a lot of functionality that these people want to see, and we are hoping and we are seeing that they then share the browser with their friends.
Okay. Today's the Save Net Neutrality Day. Can you give some of your views on what's important to you in that regard?
I mean, what we are seeing, we are a bit unfortunate with the selection of president in the United States. And yes. And there's a couple of things that actually impact us on the internet. And the first one was to say that the telcos should have the rights to monitor us as much as the should we say, Google and Facebook, and should be able to monetize and track us as much as they, which I find kind of strange because I would rather like to go in the other direction and limit what Google and Facebook are tracking and their advertisement. And then on the other hand, we now have net neutrality, and the net neutrality, in some ways, it's a difficult term to define and explain, but it's kind of like, how would you like it if your choice of internet provider would impact which services you would be able to access? I mean, in Norway, I had this issue. I'm interested in soccer, football, right? And to be able to watch all the football games with my team, I had to actually not only subscribe to multiple TV stations, but I actually had to get cable from 2 different places. And to me, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And I think that's the direction that we could be going, where you're seeing these cable companies buying content companies, and then they will potentially make sure that these content companies are getting better service than others, making it extremely difficult also for new startups to come out with fantastic new ideas. So it's moving the playing field in the direction of those with the funds.
Yeah.
And potentially for them to be playing their games. And I think it's a really bad idea. And we really, I mean, for me, fighting for an open internet is something that I've been doing for my whole life, for open standards, making sure that you have access to the same information everywhere. And this is just yet another battle on the same field where there's large companies that would like to limit your choice.
Okay. Here's another one from the crowd. What makes a digital product ethical? That's going to open up the whole field, probably.
I mean, there's multiple things. For us, it's really about doing the right thing, right? Part of what we are doing, we don't monitor our users, right? You may think that's a given, but it's not. Not in the case of browsers, and definitely not in the case of the sites that are out there. To me, what's happening with the tracking out there is a significant problem. If you look at, if you're visiting different sites, we've all seen it. You go to one site, you look at a product, you see ads for that, for all the sites that you go through from that time.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. For me, it's a bigger problem than just seeing irritating ads. The one question is, why is it possible for sites to take information from one site to another? I mean, if I were to ask you, can I have your user data? I think in most countries the answer to that would be no. I would be breaking the law if I share the user data about my users with you so you can monetize them. That's happening without even asking anyone. Yeah. And I think that's a significant problem. Now, the ads are irritating, but what is a more significant problem there is the potential of propaganda that is customized. There's been discussions about this happening in the US elections. I've been seeing more and more startups actually that are working in the direction of analyzing Facebook data and the like to be able to find out what you like and who you are so you can be targeted in a more effective way. Yeah. So targeted, one thing is making you buy things that you don't want to buy, but potentially making you do things that you don't want to do, voting for the wrong people, or the like. I mean, that's a significant problem. And trying to influence people in a subconscious way based on their Facebook profiles or the like, or their collection of data that Google does, I think is significantly problematic. So for me, part of what we're doing is, okay, we will not engage in this business. We will try to, as much as possible, to keep our users safe. But part of it is also, because probably we understand the technology better than most, also speak up and make sure that people understand what is happening. Because what is happening is serious. The internet is an important place. We must make sure that it's open and free, and that we are not starting, and we are already seeing a kind of a battleground where people are trying to kind of get their messages through on a subconscious way, and we must stop that. This should not be legal.
Yeah, and just adding to that, Apple and Google recently announced that their browsers would start to limit tracking. It's a question from the crowd. What's your view on that?
I think anything that's done in this direction is a positive. I think actually Apple talked about limiting tracking, and Google talked about removing certain kinds of ads.
Okay.
So in some ways, I would urge Google to look at their own ads, because Google is the biggest advertisement company in the world, and they have a lot of the ads and a lot of the information that's out there. And I think both with Google and Facebook, I believe there are good people behind this company. They want to do the right thing. It's about time that they do.
Okay. Another one from the crowd. What do you think will happen with Google when the ad business dies, and how new browsers can take over and still make money?
I think I don't really see the ad business going away. I actually think that we just changed a little bit how the ad business has been moving.
Okay.
Because in the past, you would see ads related to the content that you're viewing, right? Now the content is following you, which is just a change of the business model. And the business models were working just fine before this change happened. So it's a question of rolling back a few years of too much surveillance and too much traction and too much ability to tailor ads to a very, very small group of people, and just saying, okay, we don't do that anymore. That doesn't stop ads. I think ads are a big part of the internet. I think we need to have an ad-based solution out there, because otherwise a lot of content that is now free will not be free. And that's part of what we've been seeing, because I think this change in the advertisement models has been really bad for quality content. Because basically now you're seeing a situation where there's no difference between quality content and maybe a random clickbait.
Right.
They both generate the same amount of revenue because it's related to you as a person, and I think that's a problem.
Here's a tricky one concerning you. Don't you think that observing how the users behave could tell you more than just their declarations, their feedback?
I mean, in some ways you may say yes, and I think tracking this kind of information, there is value in that. I just think it's still wrong.
Okay.
And part of it is also this thing is that we want to see every single user, right? So instead of just saying, okay, we will put in what we believe is right for you, we'll do what you want. And I trust our users to tell us what they like, right? And I really think that is a better way to do things, to actually do what the users want us to do instead of trying to know better.
Do you think that a digital product can really be ethical without being open source, at least in its core? That's another one from the crowd.
Yeah, I think, I mean, open source is important, and I think a lot of people, they don't always understand what open source is, right? So open source is putting the code out, and the reality is you can put out the code out and can still be unethical, right? So the code can be visible to anyone, but it can still be doing bad things. Okay. And part of that, by the way, is the question of open standards. And I really think that one of the things that's really important for the web moving forward is the question of open standards. And I really think that we're seeing with the Internet of Things that there's a significant problem that there is no standards whatsoever. You're just seeing the different players, Google, Apple, Amazon, and others, that are creating ecosystems that are incompatible, which is making it very difficult for the small company that comes in with that fantastic solution that works across all your devices. I don't know about you, but I mean, I have a number of different devices that are so-called Internet of Things, and they are not really working very well together. I have to control each and every one of them with a separate app, which is taking away a lot of the potential with the Internet of Things. So to me, this is, I mean, I think open source is great, but it's not the solution to all problems. It's part of the solution, for sure.
Okay. Concerning your users, how did you decide to cater to power users as opposed to wider audiences that other browsers do?
I think everyone is welcome to use our browser, just to be clear on that. But clearly, anyone... Okay, what happened? Okay. Clearly, anyone that's spending a lot of time online will have a greater benefit from using our browser with all the features that we have than someone that just goes to Facebook and YouTube. If you're just going to Facebook and YouTube, probably you can use any browser. You're not having a lot of tabs open, you're not keeping any bookmarks, you're basically going to a handful of pages. I mean, then you can use any browser and they will do fine for you. If you want to be able to do more advanced stuff, you're using the browser as a tool for your work, then there's a lot of more reason to actually use our browser in preference to others.
Yeah, and the next question, how does it pay? Like when you only reach a limited user base, so to speak?
Sorry?
How does it pay? That's another question.
Yeah, the business model. I mean, the business model for all the different browsers is related to search and maybe some partnerships. So in our case, it's the search partners that we have in there. We have a few, including like Ecosia and DuckDuckGo, for example. And in addition to that, there's a few partners that we include, like eBay. We try to select partners that our users will find useful. So that's the business model.
Okay. Going back to the browser architecture, Vivaldi has some features which are not yet seen in other browsers. How do you and your team design those features in terms of requirements engineering?
I mean, mostly we just do it.
You just do it.
We're doing rapid prototyping. And the interesting thing is we're building the user interface of the browser in the browser. So we're using web technologies, which allows us to move really, really, really quickly. It actually means that the designers, in a lot of cases, can more or less do the coding themselves. They go in there and they can do a little bit of HTML and CSS and the like, and they can go and they can make things happen on screen. And then we just get the feedback from the other people in the office, from the volunteers, from everyone else around. So it's great.
Okay. Here's the last one, like a fun one. The Japanese market is historically quite conservative. How did you gain such a following there?
They just like us. I mean, in Japan, they've always been very focused on technology. And these are people, there's a lot of Japanese that are highly interested in technology. They liked what we did at Opera. I remember when we did our first phone in Japan, it was actually it was marketed as an Opera phone. It was Kyocera that did it. And it's the first time, even before Apple, that you had people, hundreds of people standing in line to buy that phone. I think Apple must have seen that and thought that was a good idea. But the basic principle there was our branding was strong. They liked what we are doing, and we have a strong user group in Japan that really likes what we are doing, and we're trying to do our best to satisfy their needs as well. And I think they're seeing that, so they're liking what we're doing.
Okay. Back to Europe. What do you think about the EU regulating browsers, browser makers and making them the user's gateway to privacy configuration? Do you like this role?
Sorry?
What do you think about the EU regulating browser makers and making them the user's gateway to privacy configuration?
I was struggling with, but what I'm finding is the EU is taking this market seriously, and I think that's really positive that they're actually monitoring, because I think there is a need to monitor. It's kind of like having a soccer match with high stakes and no referee. Right. You need to have certain rules and regulations. I think probably if there's anything, there is need for more. Sadly, we've seen that companies that are allowed to do whatever they want to do, at times they find reasons to do the wrong things, and we need to monitor that. So when it comes to browsers as well, I think it's reasonable that they have requirements for us to follow, and I think in, the focus that they've had on Microsoft and Google and Facebook and Apple and what they're doing, these are all monopolies in their fields, and I think it's reasonable that they should follow up on them and make sure that they follow the rules.
Thanks very much, Jon. That's it from us. Hope you have a great day today. Thanks.